Hello, everybody. Okay, it's our 1-year anniversary. That's right. We've been doing this for 1 year, and every time we do a show, it's new and exciting and fun and different. It's so amazing. I'm so happy everybody's here. We have what we're trying to do is build a community. And it's so great because you guys are all here and the community is growing. And spread the word, because this is what it's all about. We love having people come and talk about, do their stories. So, let's see, a couple things, just a couple notes. What we do here is, if you would like to join our Facebook page, you can do that. There's also my number. If you want to tell a story, you can send me a text. And it says Friday, May 20th, because that's wrong. It's June 20th is our next, no, thank you, Mimi. June 20th is our next story. So, typo. It's the theme for next time will be bending the rules. Bending the rules. That's going to be the theme. So that's kind of a fun one too. So what we'll do for each story is you'll notice this. We'll put on 5 words. Okay, and the 5 words are sort of anchor points in the story. And everybody has 5 words, and some people have some pictures. So this is basically, I don't know if anybody's done this. Who's heard of The Moth before? Give me a show of hands. Okay, this is a complete rip-off of The Moth. Okay, we call it The Fly. It stands for Factual Life Yarns, right? So the big thing is we are here to tell true stories, things that are happening in our lives, and without notes, and tell you all these amazing things that have happened in our lives. Like I said before, typically we have a theme. Tonight, because it's the 1-year anniversary. One more time. There's no theme. We're just going to let people tell their story. Well, come on in. The first story tonight is going to be an amazing storyteller who looks really, really good in tux, and that would be me. And I do want to show you this. My mother made this for me. This is a family tradition. I'm not going to notice the whole show, but I just want to give you a sense. Okay, so let me switch to my word. All right, that's me. Okay. So, thank you everybody for coming. Louis C.K. is a comedian, and he has a comedy bit that he talks about. It's about all the things that are kind of true in his life, the things that are real. And then he says, but there's always that thing in the back, that sort of like other thing. He calls it, of course, but maybe. So let me give you an example. He talks about how he has, there's people with, kids with peanut allergies. And he said, of course you should be careful with peanuts around these kids with peanut allergies. Of course you should. He says, I have a nephew who has peanut allergies, and I would do anything in my life to make sure that he was okay. And he says, but maybe if we gave kids peanuts with peanut allergies, there wouldn't be any kids with peanut allergies. So let's just say, okay, so of course, but maybe. So it was with this kind of philosophy in mind that I convinced my friends to commit grand theft larceny. It was 1988. We had just gotten back from our summer away to our senior year in college. I was going back to the house with Kirby and Anna and Tony and myself. And we were really excited to go back to our house that we had rented the year before. And when we got there, we had subletted it to some girls. And when we got there, for some reason, the beds seemed to be missing. There just weren't beds. We couldn't really figure it out. Now, there was one bed that was definitely there. And that was the bed that Kirby had found on the side of the road the previous year. He thought it would be a good idea to take it home, so he convinced my other roommate, Tony, to put it on top of his car. And then Kirby, being kind of a tall, lanky guy, went on top of the mattress on top of the car and drove across campus. So we had that bed for a year. It was kind of gross, and it was sort of, we were surprised that it made it a whole year without getting bed bugs or whatever you get from disgusting beds inside the road. Well, we dealt with the bed situation. We just kind of had to deal with it, and we moved on. And it was the first couple weekends of our the summer of the semester. Our first semester, And we decided to have a party, and we were very excited about having a party because we were all kinds of kind of nerdy guys and thought it'd be really fun to have a party. We invited everybody we knew, and they all came, and it was this amazing thing. We had so many people. It was just a raging party. We had gotten a keg. Everybody's happy. We're having a great time. We're drinking. And about 45 minutes in, I looked to my buddy, my roommate Tony, and I gave him that nod like, we did it. We made it. We are here. Look at this party. It's raging. Until about a few minutes later, they all started to leave. And we were like, wait, we have lots of beer. Where are you guys going? And what we didn't realize and what we didn't put together was the first Saturday of a semester, everybody's having parties. So people are party hopping, and they kind of hopped away from our party. So it was just me and Tony and Anna and Kirby and a few other friends, and we sort of were sitting there drinking beer in our keg. And so across the street from our house was a house that was owned by a company called Campus Rentals. Now, Campus Rentals went around and they would buy up all the houses in Ann Arbor. I went to Michigan. Go Blue. Anybody?
Go Blue!
There we go. In Ann Arbor, they'd buy all the houses, and it was one of those things where they'd buy the houses and then they would gouge the students because it was a monopoly. No other people. It was just either individuals who had these houses or this Campus Rentals places. So I had done some reconnaissance, and I remembered seeing something in that house. So I kind of, in my little bit inebriated state, wandered across the street, and I looked in the window of the house, and I looked in, they had a separate garage, and I looked in the garage, and in the garage, there seemed to be some mattresses. So I thought, let me just check the windows, and went around checking all the doors. They were all locked, except for one. There was just a hole where the doorknob should be, and I put my finger in and turned it, and the door opened. And I walked inside this place, and it was like mattress Valhalla. I mean, there was literally dozens of mattresses still wrapped in plastic, sitting there, beds and box springs, and I was like, oh my God. And so I left this house, and I walked back across the street, and in my head, I'm having this argument with myself. Of course you shouldn't steal this. This would be wrong. This would be terrible. And then I thought, but maybe I'd be liberating these beds from an evil corporation who's gouging students left and right. And I used that philosophy to convince my friends to do this. So we wandered back across the street, and each of us grabbed 4 beds and 4 box springs, and we are walking across the street with these things. And it's literally across the way, and just a few doors down, there's another party happening. It's a porch party, and we had dozens of witnesses. But again, with the beer in our system, we were fine. We walked across the street, we got into the house, we took off the plastic, we all set up our beds, and Tony and Anna and I slept the sleep of kings and queens as we just enjoyed. We luxuriated in this really brand new, comfortable beds. Kirby, not so much. Kirby was paranoid. Kirby was terrified. So we took all the plastic that we had taken off the beds, and he brought them he got in his car and drove to North Campus. Remember how far North Campus is from the main part of campus? All the way far, and dumped it in the dumpster. And then he didn't sleep that night at all. And the next morning he woke up and he came into all rooms and he ripped off the do not remove tags. Because he was convinced there was some sort of tracking device or something. They were going to find these beds. It was going to be terrible. And he drove the tags into the city where he was working as an intern, and he deposited each tag in different garbage cans across the campus. Now, of course we shouldn't have taken these beds. It was wrong. It was wrong to do this. The good news is that the statute of limitations has long since passed. But maybe if we hadn't taken the bed, Kirby wouldn't have had a bed for 7 years. Anna and I wouldn't have had beds for over 10 years. Tony wouldn't have just gotten rid of his bed. Of course, but maybe. Thank you. Let's give it up for Gary. It was fantastic. Thank you. What's that?
Pictures of the bed.
Oh yeah, no, I do have a picture though. Hold on. So I don't have the bed. but I do have, okay. So this was the house, and I just want to tell you, so on the far left is me, and then Kirby, and then Stan, who didn't live there the next year, and then Tony. This was the Jews versus Goys football game. We figured out that Jews did not win. But we run the banks now, so there you go. Anyway, so that's that. And one thing I didn't do is put on my little microphone, so hopefully the video will record that. I'm going to get that out. One moment. Let's give it up for Falk.
My story is titled On Time, and some of you might already have heard it because this is, as we know, the 1-year anniversary. Yay! And we get to retell stories. So this is the story On Time. It's the Tuesday after New Year's, and I'm at SFO. I am peeking anxiously up at a monitor that shows me that my flight to Boston is 20 minutes delayed. I need to make a connection in Boston to get to Philadelphia because you see, the next morning really early, I'll give a talk at the Modern Language Association. I'm really excited about it. I worked really hard on this paper. It's my first time presenting at this major conference. But as I see from the monitor, the flight is 20 minutes delayed. My connection in Boston is really, really tight, and now it's getting even tighter. And I am on the last flight out of Boston to Philadelphia that night. So I am, nervous, and I walk up to the counter and I say to the woman behind the counter, is there a direct flight to Philadelphia from San Francisco? And she says, sadly no, but don't worry, you'll make it to Boston on time. Something about tailwinds being in our favor. And I walk away and I'm thinking, I don't trust her. I don't believe it. Why do I have to be so critical? Maybe I should trust more. I don't. I'm on the plane, I'm constantly watching the time, and I realize we are not going to make it to Boston on time. We're actually 10 minutes late, and I rush off the plane, and I ask the gate agent, I say, where's the connecting flight, to Philadelphia? And he said, Terminal C, gate 17. You'll make it just in time. And I'm thinking, oh really? I'm in Terminal A, and that's Terminal C. So I start running. I'm wearing a backpack, and I have my carry-on pulling it behind me, and my backpack, it's like sloshing around on my back, and I'm running and having a really hard time pulling my suitcase. And I'm running, following the signs, Terminal B and C. The signs keep saying B and C, and I'm thinking, what, maybe, I should not have trusted the gate agent. Maybe it isn't actually C. Or maybe I should look at the monitor, but then I don't have time because I have to run. And, maybe, just maybe, these gate agents are thinking, how can we make her responsible for missing the connection? We just want to send her to C. And they are up there on the monitor watching me and going, look, there's another idiot running like crazy. So I'm thinking all these things, right? And then, finally B and C splits, and I'm careening around the corner, to get to area C. And what do I see? Nothing, absolutely nothing, except for one lonely security gate agent sitting there, looking confused at me. And I'm like, okay, it's the C, gate 17, and he just, lazily waves his hand, and I'm rushing through the security, and I'm getting onto the concourse, and again, nothing, emptiness, except for one of those cleaning dudes with one of those floor buffers, moving the machine from side to side. And I'm scanning Terminal C, the concourse, and luckily, there's gate 17 and it's lit up. So hey, there's hope, right? And there's another gate agent at gate 17, and she's not very talkative. She just points and tells me to sit down. And on the monitor it says, Philadelphia, flight 321, leaving in 10 minutes. You see, the weird thing is though, I'm the only one at the gate. There's nobody there, just me. And I'm thinking, this is so strange, and I'm trying to kind of be, trusting and less critical. And then, you know, the plane arrives at that gate, and about 50 passengers disembark. And then the flight attendant comes out of the jetway, and she has this huge smile on her face, and she, you know, invites me onto the plane, and she says to me, "Ma'am, your private jet awaits you." And now I'm going, oh, I know what this is. This is Hidden Camera. My favorite show when I was a kid. I didn't even know it was still on the air. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to play along. And we get onto the empty plane, and you know, all the overhead bins are open. And I always fantasized about running down the aisle and closing them. So I asked her, I said, can I do it? And she says, sure. And I'm thinking this will play great, you know, when they air that show, that's going to look really good. So I'm going down the aisle, I'm closing all the overhead, and getting to the back of the plane, and I'm thinking, okay, now I'm going to turn around, and she's going to say, you know, smile, you're on Hidden Camera. But she doesn't. She says, this is going to be a very bumpy ride on account of the plane being empty.
Oh.
And I'm going, what? Not Hidden Camera? What's going on? You know, what is the logical explanation for this? And suddenly, you know, my body gets flooded with panic, and I'm thinking, this is an alien abduction. And in that moment, you know, the door to the plane closes, and the door from the cockpit opens, and out comes the pilot with a plate of cookies. And he offers it to me and the flight attendant. And for about 2 seconds, all I can think of, and he also says, my wife baked them. And for 2 seconds, I think, they are poisoned. They are laced with a sedative, because right now I'm being taken to Planet Xeon, and some medical device is going to be implanted in my head. You know, and I'm getting super panicky. So, you know, what can I do? You know, I'm on the plane. What can I do? So the stewardess, you know, tells me, you know, sit down, you know, and you know, strap yourself in. And you know, all I'm thinking is, you know, okay, you know, this is going to be a bumpy ride. What is going to happen? And I realize in this moment, the only logical thought in my brain is, I'm not going to make it to Philadelphia on time. I did make it to Philadelphia on time. I did get to do it. And probably you ask yourself, how did it happen? How did she get to be the only passenger on the plane? Well, what had happened is that the flight previously leaving for Philadelphia was incredibly late. And all the people that were going to take flight 321 went on that earlier flight. So when I came late, the plane which arrived was the plane that had to return to Philadelphia. So I was the only one there. So the next day, you know, it's early morning, and I'm giving my talk at the MLA, you know, and outwardly, you know, I look like the cool, critical, rational academic. But inside, I knew my brain actually could conceive of there being aliens. So how rational am I really?
So I'm just wondering, did they have the do not remove tags there too? You know, your story reminded me of, I did a lot of traveling for work pre-pandemic. That's all I did was travel. I went all over the country and all over the world and just travel. And I remember one time I was in some podunk little town, and I remember it was tiny, and I really wanted to leave. And I had a problem, and I got through through the security, and I got to the gate, and they said, "Oh, I'm sorry." It was a tiny plane, one of those like 2 propeller planes, and they said, "You know, you're too late." And I'm like, well, "The plane? I mean, it was right." I'm like, "The plane is right there," and he's like, "I'm sorry, you can't." I'm like, "The pilot is right there, walking around the plane. Just ask him." And he's like, "I'm sorry, we just can't." Like, I'm like, I went over the window, I knocked on the window, and the pilot looked up, and he came over, and he's like, Anyway, that was the old days. That was sort of pre 9/11, blah blah blah. All right. So, all right, we have our next storyteller, which is going to be my friend Fred. Fred was now. I just want to while we welcome Fred up to the stage. Fred was in the very first. Fred was at the very first fly, which the video didn't turn out well, and my story wasn't that great, and it's just so great to have him back. All the way from Alameda, Fred, come on!
Will this cause chaos if I move this mic off?
You can do whatever you need to do, Fred.
Okay, cool. Hi, everybody. Good to see you.
Hi, Fred!
I have a story to tell that actually also involves a plane, but it's not. But that was a beautiful story, so I feel like I'm going to try to do my best here. But I want you all to think about a decision that maybe you made in your life that changed the trajectory of the rest of your life. Can you think about a decision like that? But I don't want you to think about one that you spent a lot of time on with spreadsheets and pros and cons and talking to friends and saying what makes the most sense. This is a whimsical decision that just happens in the moment. And that's the story I'd like to talk about tonight. So it started off easy enough. I was also on a plane ride. I was going to East Lansing from San Francisco, stopping in Detroit for a short layover, no problem. Back to your Michigan theme as well. And the plane was delayed, and it kept getting delayed. And I knew it was just not that far away. So I thought, I'm just going to rent my car early. So I called like 6 different rental car companies, and they all said, no, or it's going to be this extra fee, and I was cheap, I was poor, I was all that stuff. And so I said, darn it, I'm walking around, I'm kind of stomping, and the whole place is covered with people. And all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, I forgot one more rental car company. And I saw one phone that was open because everyone go with me on this time travel. It was before cell phones. And I had to use a payphone. And so I go over, and unfortunately, though, there's one person with a cell phone in the airport, and she is underneath this phone. And so I'm like, well, damn it, I'm just going to go make that call. And so I go, and I basically am standing over her, but I'm like, make the phone call, talk to the rental car company, and they say, yes, you can do it. And I say, fantastic. I hang up, and as I hang up, I get a little tug on my jeans, and this beautiful woman says to me, hey, can I get a ride? I'm going to East Lansing as well. And I said the fateful words, sure, grab your side. Little did I know that as she was sitting up there down there looking at me, talking to her mother, she was on the phone with her mother, and she said, hey, I think I'm going to ask this guy to hitchhike. And her mother says, well, is he a redneck? She said, I don't know. He said, well, is he a businessman? Like, not sure. He said, well, dear, you're the one who's there. You'll make a good decision. Go ahead. Now, who says that? When your daughter asked you to hitchhike. Thank God this woman said that, though. I was excited. So we start going along. She's got her, kind of her bag that she's carrying with a stuffed animal poking out, and really cute. I won't go further. A little denim skirt. But anyway, as we're going towards the rental car company, she turns to me, and I should have known at this point it was time to run. She's like, what if you're a mass murderer? And I was like, well, wait a minute, you picked me up. And so we get to the rental car company. I'm trying to transact business, and she says that to the rental car person. She's like, if I show up on a milk carton, this is the guy. And the rental car person, she's like, okay, I got you covered. She's holding the ID up to the camera to prove the point. So we get in the car, and we have this incredible ride. I don't know, it was like an hour and a half or so, and it just, everything. Sunset, music was perfect. I had this conversation that I just feel like I've never had with anyone. It was like my closest friend all of a sudden. And we get to the other side where we're supposed to pick up my luggage, and my friend who I was meeting there had already picked it up. And she, this woman I was with, couldn't find her group. She was going there for a conference. She was supposed to connect with the group. And I, being the gentleman that I am, you don't know me well, said, you can stay with me tonight. It was okay. My friend was a woman, and I was like, it'll be safe. You'll be all right. And she said, sure. Another kind of serendipitous moment. And then I made the phone call to my friend who was having the wedding, and it was his night, it was his rehearsal dinner, and I did what everyone does, is call up the groom the night of the rehearsal dinner and say, hey, do you mind if I bring a hitchhiker to your rehearsal dinner? Today I'm horrified by this, but somehow in my 25-year-old brain or 30-year-old brain, it was like, that makes sense. And in his brain, you're like, sure, bring a hitchhiker. And so she came to the rehearsal dinner. We had this wonderful time dancing, all of that. She stayed the night with my friend in the other bed. And while she was in the bathroom, I had a rational moment, and I took my wallet and I hid it under the mattress. Because I was like, it'll be hard to explain to the policeman later. I invited hitchhiker to my room, and then she stole my wallet. And then in the morning at 6 a.m. she left, and I gave her my card, and I said, hey, if you're ever in San Francisco, she was from North Carolina, give me a call. And I thought, it would be just a funny story to tell, right? So I go to the wedding. It's wonderful. The bride pulls me aside and says, oh, by the way, I met your hitchhiker. She doesn't need a ride back to the airport. And I literally remember my heart sinking, being like, oh, that would have been kind of fun. And so I drop off the car on Sunday, I'm going back, tracing my steps through Detroit, and I come around the corner, and there is this woman talking to my friend. And I said, what plane are you taking? She's taking a different flight. And again, back in the day, I go up to the counter, I said, I'd like to take a different flight with this woman and sit next to her. And they say, sure, no fee, go ahead and do that. So we go on this flight, and on the plane, I say the words I've never said to anyone. I'm like, we should get married. This would be a great story to tell someday. And she said, sure. And so we land on the airport, and I have a really tight connection. And she says, well, why don't you miss your flight? And so for the first time in my life, I said, okay. And I said, but if I miss my flight, then you've got to fly out and see me in San Francisco. And she said, sure. So we started walking around the airport, and I said, we should find a little gumball machine with rings in it, and we'll just get, married on the spot. And we went around, we didn't find it. We thought it was the most romantic airport in the world. If anyone's split and flown through Detroit, you know how that's And I missed my flight. I got on another one, but she left first. And before she left, I said, hey, can I give you a kiss? And we had a kiss. And it was like that movie star kiss where you just feel like the world is spinning around you and the camera's around. It was just amazing. I never had a kiss like that in my life. And so she went off, and I went back home, and a week later I'm with my brother at his wedding, and I said, I've met the woman I'm going to marry. And he, of course, called BS on that. He's like, you're crazy. What are you talking about? So we got on the phone with the priest and my two brothers, and they started interrogating this woman I had met on the other side of the country to prove was this a real thing, or was I making it up? And she passed that test, which was great. A week later, I actually went out and met her whole family. 6 months later, she moved to San Francisco. And 6 months after that, I proposed. And a year later, we were married. And now, I'm proud to say, this is our 25-year anniversary. Every day that when she said, hey, can I get a ride? I said, sure, grab your bag.
Okay, let's give it up for Fred. That's a great story. Everybody wants to talk back today. Oh, that's so cute. Oh. So I just want to say I've known Fred and Meg for a long time, and they are as crazy as that always, and it's amazing. So I think it's fantastic. So again, one more time, Fred and Meg. Okay. So all right, we're going to have a new storyteller for us tonight. I'm looking at her right now. So we're going to have Sam come up and tell us. Let's give it up for Sam, everybody. Oh wait, I just wanted to, is that your wedding invitation?
That's the wedding picture, North Carolina governor's name.
All right.
So when he was telling his story, I knew I was going to be next because my story is like the polar opposite of the story that we just heard. Hi everyone, I'm Sam. Good evening. Thank you, Gary, for this opportunity. Guten Abend, Shabbat Shalom. You created a shul here.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing. Okay, okay. I've only told this story in the shower. I did not mean to go on a date with a Nazi. I did not mean to go on a date with a Nazi. I mean, nobody means to go on a date with an actual Nazi, except other Nazis, of course, and maybe Elon Musk these days. But I did not mean to go on a date with a Nazi. My first mistake. In school, they teach you what Nazis look like, right? They're wearing these uniforms, and they have, like, pins and crosses and armbands with swastikas, and they're doing those, like, Elon Musk things with their arms, but, like, Nazis don't look like what you think they're going to look like today. My Nazi, or the Nazi I accidentally went on a date with, was wearing a cashmere sweater. First lesson, Nazis don't look like Nazis anymore. My second mistake. I was living in Germany. Now, statistically speaking, I think my chances of meeting a real life Nazi were probably higher because I was living in Germany. But let me say, I love Germany. I've spent a lot of time living there. I have a PhD in German philosophy. I'm an expert on Hannah Arendt, which retrospectively possibly prepared me to go on a date with a German Nazi because she dated one very famously. But the first time I went to Germany, I fell in love with the country, and it was a very serious decision to go. So at the time the first time I went with my boyfriend. We met at Michigan.
Go Blue.
Go Blue. And we were summoned to the dinner table by his family in New York City. And so we're sitting around the table. We've announced that we're going to take this vacation. And his father's sitting here, and his mother, and his stepfather, and his sister, and he's here, and I'm here. And we're talking about the moral complexities of Jewish people traveling to Germany. And we're talking about whether or not it's a good idea that we go on this trip. And we decide to compromise. And we created Google Doc with every hotel we're gonna stay at, all of the phone numbers, addresses, and share it. This is 15 years ago. And so this was our compromise. On our 10-day trip, we decided that we would take a tour of the great Holocaust memorials of Europe. So we began in Berlin with the Memorial to the Murdered Jews of Europe, which remains the worst named memorial ever. We went to the Topography of Terror Museum, the Berlin Holocaust Museum, the Vienna Holocaust Museum, the Vienna Holocaust Plus. We went to the Holocaust Museum in Prague, followed by the Pincus Cemetery and Memorial, topped off by a day trip to Theresienstadt before we returned to the United States. I needed about 2 months of vacation when I came back from the trip to Germany, but retrospectively, his parents were right. It was probably not a good idea for us to go together because the moment we came home, I broke up with the boyfriend and I moved to Germany to study German at Heidelberg University, to work on a book about Hannah Arendt. So it's my first week in Germany. I'm taking classes in German literature, I'm studying German translation, I'm studying German poetry, and I'm living in Heidelberg, which is this beautiful old city. And one day when I'm leaving class, my professor walks up alongside me on the bridge, the Alte Brücke. I'm crossing into the Altstadt. This is my third or fourth mistake. You shouldn't date your professors. Are there any young people here? They're in the back, they're hiding. This is what I have come to. This was my mistake. I should have known better. I had dated 3 or 4 of my professors when I was in college, and I knew it was a bad idea. And so my lesson is, you should not sleep sleep with your professors, not because it's morally wrong, but because I can assure you they are bad in bed. Anybody who's in their head all the time that much is not so much in their... Anyway, don't date your professors. This was my third mistake. We're walking across the Altabrücke. He walks up alongside of me and he says, would you like to go for coffee? Yeah, that would be great. So we're walking along the bridge, and there's the Schloss, the castle over Heidelberg, and he takes me to this cozy little European cafe, and he orders his cappuccino, zweimal cappuccino bitte, and we're sitting there drinking cafes, and he looks at me, and he says, are you lonely? You don't really speak German well. You don't know anyone here. Fifth mistake. If anybody ever asks you if you feel lonely, run. Run for your life. Okay? Loneliness is dangerous. Loneliness pushes us into spending time with people we maybe should not be spending time with. And I said yes, and I ended up accidentally going on a date with a Nazi. So we're sitting there drinking cappuccinos. And he's telling me about how he likes to fly airplanes over the Schwarzwald in his free time to look down on the beautiful land. And I'm sitting there and I'm just like kind of gazing at him, and he's so cute. And he's wearing this like cashmere sweater and he has all this hair. And I'm just like looking at him more than I'm listening to him, and it's nice to be sitting there. And I ask him, how did you get this giant scar on your cheek? Fifth, sixth mistake. How was I supposed to know that this is a Schmiese, which is a scar that you get in a neo-Nazi conservative fraternity during a fencing initiation where they slice the cheek open in order to bring you into the group? They don't teach you that when they're teaching you about Nazis in school. They don't teach you that. I didn't know, not my fault. So we finish our cappuccinos and he says to me, can I see you tomorrow? Can I take you out on a date, on a proper date? Yeah, I said, this is great. I'm in Germany a week, I have a date, my professor, he's cute. He says, I'll pick you up in the parking lot after school. So after school, it's like 2:30, I'm standing in the parking lot. I'm like 30, by the way, I'm an adult here. I'm standing in the parking lot and he comes and picks me up in his like blue Volvo. And he says, I want to show you something. You're new here, you don't know anything. And I'm like, well, this is the best. Like, when you're in a foreign place and you don't know anything and people take you and show you around. And we drive up the mountain along the Philosophenweg. And we get out of the car and we park, and there's like a little Hütte selling pretzels and beer, and there are people there taking photos and eating, and we walk through the woods, through this clearing that opens onto a magnificent theater that's been carved in stone into the mountainside. Seats like 20,000 people. It's beautiful. I'm thinking this is like a 2nd century Roman amphitheater. And we're standing at the top of it, looking down at the stage, and he says, stay right here. And he runs down the center aisle, and he goes and stands in the middle of the stage. And it's beautiful. And there's these columns, it's like you can imagine the victors standing there on top of them. And he looks up at me from the stage and he says, it has perfect acoustics. And it did, it had perfect acoustics. And then he looks at me and he says, come here. And I'm like, okay, yeah. And I'm like running down the center aisle. My dress is like flowing in the wind behind me. It's like springtime, it's beautiful. And I meet him center stage and I say, what is this place? What is this beautiful place? And he says, this is the Tinkstatte. It was built by Joseph Goebbels in the 1930s to honor the glory of the German Republic. It was only used once, though. It was initiated by Joseph Goebbels. And I'm like, at this point, I'm like, something's not quite right here. And I look at him and I say, why is it still here? And he's like, well, it's part of our history. It's part of our culture. We take care of it. Like we do other things with it now. And I'm getting a little quiet at this point. Like something like an alarm bell's starting to go off. I'm standing in the middle of a Nazi amphitheater on a first date. And he's like, let's go to the brewery. Let's grab a beer and go for a walk on the Neckarwiese, the nice path along the river that runs through Heidelberg. So we go down the mountain and we get some beers and we're walking through the grass and we sit down in the grass. And he reclines and he's staring up at the Schloss. And I'm looking at him now and he's still cute, but something's bugging me and I can't put my finger on it. And he starts reciting poetry to me. Oh my God, so romantic, right? Vaterland. Oh, Vaterland. Oh, Droge, Vaterland. And he finishes this whole poem, and I have no idea what he said. No freaking idea what he has said. And what is that? And he's like, it's Hölderlin, the great German romantic poet, Fatherland. And I'm like, oh, I think we're going to read Hölderlin later in the semester. Okay, yeah, no, it sounds good. And we finished the date, and he says, can I drive you home? Can I drive you home? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So it's like a 10-minute drive back to my dorm complex, and we're in the car, and we're getting close to my dorm room, and we come to a red light. And he looks at me, and I look at him, and he leans over and he kisses me. And in that moment, when he kissed me, something happened. Somehow I knew something was terribly wrong. And I don't know where it came from. I don't know what happened. I don't know where the words came from, but I just looked at him and I said, "Are you married?" And he said, "Yeah." So, here are your lessons. Please remember that Nazis don't dress in Nazi uniforms anymore. No, I'm just joking. Thanks, Gary.
All right, what have we learned tonight? Don't date Nazis, and definitely don't take those little do not remove tags off the thing. All right. So we have one more storyteller tonight. Not tonight, before the break. So we're going to have Christine come up and tell her story. And another warm welcome for a new storyteller here. She's an experienced storyteller, so I'm really excited. But Christine, come on up. Christine. Give it up for Christine.
Years ago, I went into recovery. And in order to stay on the straight and narrow and sober, I know I needed the toughest sponsor I could find. And so I found her. About this tall, Russian, Vietnam vet paratrooper. Nickname Iron Maiden. You can't get much tougher than a Russian paratrooper. And Barbara and I, we had many adventures. And she was tough, but she was fair. And she walked me through the 12 steps of recovery. Now there comes a time in the 12-step program that's called Step 9. And Step 9 is all about making amends. Where I come from, making amends, what that looks like is you make amends for harms done, especially if you're a crazy drunk like I was, and lots of things to say you're sorry about. And then there's forgiveness statements, forgiveness, because it's two to be in a relationship and chances are there's things to forgive. And then there's appreciation statements, amends, forgiveness, appreciation. 10 years worth of therapy in one of those things. So I'm on step 9 and we're getting ready to make amends to my father. My father died when I was young, when I was 15 years old, and he died unexpectedly. And I was at the height of teenagerdom. I was restless, irritable, discontent. I broke my father's heart over and over and over again. My father, on the other hand, my husband would say, he was a bon vivant orator. He was a well-to-do lawyer. He was incredibly magnetic man. But on the other hand, he was also violent and cruel. And there was a lot of physical abuse. So it was a complicated relationship with my dad. Anybody got a complicated relationship with your dad? Just a few of you. Okay, we'll get. So we get to this point, and Barbara says to me, she says, before you go to that tombstone in Reno, you need eyes. You need eyes to receive your amends, and I'm going to give you my eyes. You need someone to receive your amends before you say it to the tombstone. She'd given me her time and her attention, and now she's giving me her eyes. We made a date to meet at the gazebo over there at Blackie's pasture. It's a beautiful little gazebo on a sward of green and quite lush and wonderful and out of the way. And on the day we chose, it was raining buckets. Okay. So I'm sitting in my car and I'm hoping Iron Maiden isn't going to come. Nothing stops a Russian soldier, as we are discovering today. And so there she was. So we go scampering across the paddock, and we get to the gazebo, and it's raining like crazy. And she's sitting there, and I'm sitting here. And I begin to give my amends to this Russian soldier, and I get to see her in tears. And it was raining on the outside of that gazebo. Let me tell you, it was raining on the inside of that gazebo. I mean, I was just so relieved. When Dad died unexpectedly, I had poured myself into a Scotch bottle. And I hadn't come out of that Scotch bottle for 17 years. And finally, the door opens for relief. The door opens for forgiveness, for appreciation, for amends. And finally, that wounded soul of mine had that sense of healing and peace. And she gave me that. She gave me that. She gave me her eyes. Fast forward 20 years. Now I'm the Iron Maiden. I'm the Glamazon. And I get some woman, and she's got a father story, okay? Hate my dad, I hate my dad. He ran off with another woman, he left us in poverty, and I had to live with my grandmother. And I said, listen, honey, we're only on step 1. Back off. I want you losing your shirt over this, you know. We got a lot of steps to go. So she said, no, okay. So she trusted me. And we got to step 8. And when she comes to me, and she says, Christine, I think I'm ready to forgive my dad. I'm thinking, there is a God. But anyways, I said, great. I said, what we need is a photo of your dad, and I will be your dad. I will give you my eyes. I knew from Barbara what to do for this woman who was hurting so bad over her dad, and finally, she's ready, and I knew what to do. And she hated her dad so much she didn't even have a photo of this guy. But she finally found one, crummy old black and white photo in the garage, in the bottom of a box. There's Dad. And she picks up this crumpled old thing, and it's a black and white photo of her with her father in some cantina in Puerto Vallarta, okay? and they were drinking margaritas. And the photo still had the salt of the margarita on it, you know, it was just like, oh, how lovely. So she takes a picture of the picture, and now it's on her iPhone. She sets up her dining room table, it's beautiful with candles and flowers and prayer books, and she gives me the amends to her father, the forgiveness to her father, the appreciation of her to her father. And that moment of spending time with her in tears, good tears, washing away the sadness, the anger, the resentment, the horror then turned into a place of honor on her altar. He moved from that dusty old box in the garage to a place of honor and love in her heart. And that's where he gets to live now. So why am I telling you this? I always feel like why are we listening to this? Let me give you the bottom line here. If you have unresolved issues with someone in your life, don't wait for the tombstone. Find a way to find amends, forgiveness, and appreciation for everything, for the whole bit. Because that bit brought you to where you are today. There's appreciation there. And to underscore the truth that the three greatest things we can ever give anybody is our time, our attention, and our eyes.
All right, let's give it up for Christine. That's just a couple of things I want to mention to you. Again, we're going to have a little break in a minute, and the bathroom is back there. There's drinks over there, and we'll have about 20 minutes. If anybody hasn't paid, talk to Jules. If anybody needs some food or drink, it's talk to Jules. And I sent a piece of paper around with somewhere back there. Yeah, keep passing them around. If you have your emails and your name, just write legibly, please, if you want to put on the mailing list. So let's give it up with the first 5 storytellers. Thank you so much. All right. Well, welcome back. Welcome back to the second half of our 1-year anniversary show. Okay, just a reminder, June 20th, not May, June 20th is our next show, probably. Bending the rules of the theme. If you are interested, please send me a text and we'll talk. So far, we've had some great stories. Let's give it up for the first 5 storytellers. Okay, so now we have a special storyteller who's been here once before and has done an amazing job. We're going to bring Lynn up to tell her story. Give it up for Lynn.
Since the Trump administration is snatching suspected illegal immigrants, criminal immigrants off the streets and sending them to gulags in foreign countries, I thought this would be a good time to talk about my illegal criminal family members. My grandpa Rusin was a deserter and a horse thief, and also an illegal immigrant. He was in the Polish cavalry regiment when it was part of the Austro-Hungarian military. And one day, in 1902, he deserted, and he took his horse with him. Now he was a fugitive without any papers, and he couldn't get on a train or a ship in any place that was controlled by Austria, because he probably would have been arrested and maybe shot. So he rode his horse from Hungary to Le Havre, France, and became a stowaway on a cargo ship bound for America.
Wow.
Now, somewhere in the Atlantic, the ship began to sink. And Grandpa had a bottle of vodka with him, so when he heard the ship was sinking, he drank the vodka. And when the rescuers finally arrived, Grandpa was so drunk, he was the last one off the ship before the captain. They took him to Ellis Island, and when asked for his papers, he told them they went down with the ship. Grandpa settled in Crawford County, Kansas, and worked in the Pittsburgh, Kansas coal mines. He bought a beautiful piece of property from the coal company, and he built a one-room shanty there. He raised pigs and cows, and plowed his cornfield with a handheld plow and a mule. Later, he built a four-room house for Grandma and their 10 children. And on the walls of that house, my grandmother hung pictures of President Franklin Roosevelt and the Blessed Virgin Mary with her bleeding heart. Grandpa used to start his mornings with a shot of moonshine in his coffee. But I never knew him to actually make moonshine. But like a lot of Balkan immigrants, he made his own wine. And when my family would drive down from Kansas City, Kansas to visit the farm, Grandpa and his brother Valentine would be standing in the front yard waiting for us, each with a large iced tea sized glass of Grandpa's wine in their hand. Now, Kansas had been a dry state since 1880, when the legislature had passed a prohibition law. But the Kansas governors had been unable to stamp out saloons, let alone worry about winemaking or moonshine operations. The Senate Saloon, along with 43 other saloons in the capital, managed to keep their doors open by paying a $100 monthly fine. And back in Pittsburgh, beer wagons constantly drove up and down the street, supplying the 23 saloons there. Now up north, in Medicine Lodge, Kansas, Carrie Nation was very angry with the Kansas authorities' inability to enforce their liquor ban. And one time she had a dream that God told her to destroy 6 saloons in nearby Kiowa, Kansas. So she took some rocks and a hatchet and she did just that. She would throw the rocks through the windows and break them, and then she would go inside and she would chop the bar to pieces. Then she would go behind the bar and smash the big mirror and all the bottles of alcohol. She was sometimes accompanied by a group of women singing hymns and reading Bible verses. She became quite famous for chopping up saloons in Kansas. She was arrested 30 times and paid her fines by selling pewter hatchet pins. But she too was unable to stamp out saloons in Kansas. Now, after World War I, coal mining became unprofitable. And a lot of the Pittsburgh miners either lost their jobs or had their pay reduced. But then, in 1919, the U.S. Congress passed the 18th Amendment, which made the manufacturing, transportation, and sale of alcohol illegal all across the United States. Now, this this became a wonderful opportunity for these impoverished miners to make a living. And Crawford County became the moonshine capital of the world. Thief Shaft liquor was sold, it was called that because it was manufactured somewhere in the miles of tunnels in the abandoned Deep Shaft coal mine. And it was sold all across the United States and even in some foreign countries. A factory in Pittsburgh was producing 210 gallons of alcohol a day. My Aunt Helen's future mother-in-law was making moonshine. And she was periodically arrested, put in jail, and had her still destroyed. While she was in jail, she would crochet a tablecloth and then sell it when she got out and use the money to pay her fine, and then she would set her still up again. Then in 1925, Ma Fagan, that's who I'm talking about, husband hung himself in the front yard, leaving her with 7 children to support. Now, Ma Fagan was a fierce woman. She raised those children on this god-awful combination called M-brown soup. You would brown some flour in a big dollop of unrefined lard, and then you would add enough water to make a thin soup, and you would add 1 beaten egg and some salt, and then you would ladle it over a piece of bread in the soup bowl. Ma used to also send the boys down to the railroad tracks where they would jump on open-topped, moving coal cars. And they would kick off chunks of coal and then jump off and go back and pick up the coal and bring it home for the family stove. Ma's son Pug, that was he got his nickname when after some transgression, Ma locked all 5 boys in the dark cellar where she stored her moonshine. And the boys started drinking the moonshine, and a drunken Pug fell off the stairs and broke his nose. Now Pug had a specially built tank in his truck that he used to fill with moonshine and transport it across the Kansas-Oklahoma border to sell on the Osage and Cherokee Indian reservations. If the feds were following him, he had a lever inside his truck that he could switch on and spill all the moonshine out on the road. Now, during Prohibition, my parents were living in Chicago. And my mother's cousin had a Model A Ford. And he would regularly drive my parents 584 miles down the mythic Route 66 from Chicago to visit family in Pittsburgh. My mother would sit in the front with her cousin and his wife, and my father would sit in the rumble seat. Now, rumble seats are open-air upholstered seats that you would pull out of the back of a car. It sat over the rear axle, so when you were riding, the seat would vibrate or rumble. My father said these trips were horrible. He would be sitting back there with the sun beating down on him, sometimes in temperatures of over 100 degrees, with dirt and dust blowing in his face. And sometimes he was rained upon. When they would come down for a visit, my father would always bring Grandpa a bottle of vodka that he bought from Chicago gangsters. And one time, Grandpa decided to have a party. And so he invited all of his friends over, and he's going around filling glasses and pointing to the bottle and saying, "Good stuff, government label." And my father took him aside and said, "I brought that vodka down for you. Why are you giving it to all these farmers?" daughters. They aren't going to know the difference. Well, it turns out Grandpa poured the vodka in another container and filled the bottle with moonshine. Now, the Fabian family moved to Summit, Illinois, and Ma answered an ad in a Lonely Hearts column and married a 65-year-old widower. When he died a few years later, Ma got the house, much to the dismay of his grown children. When I knew Ma, she was living in that house with her 2 daughters, Gayla and Mary. Now, Gayla was divorced, but Mary actually had an alcoholic husband, Henry DeVoe, but Ma wouldn't let him in the house. If Mary wanted to sleep with her husband, she had to go to the shed in the backyard where Ma forced Henry to live. And if Henry needed to use the toilet, he had to go to the nearest bar. Ma set up her still in the Summit house, and one time the still blew up, and she nearly burned the house down. When I moved to California, my aunt in the East Bay gave me a gallon of Grandpa's wine, and I put it in the refrigerator in the garage. And I was having a party, and I made a big bowl of punch, and my guests drank up all the punch very quickly. Now, I was an inexperienced hostess, and I didn't have anything else to give them. And then I remembered Grandpa's wine in the garage. The only thing I had to add to it was a bottle of Rose's sweetened lime juice. So I poured the lime juice and the gallon of Grandpa's wine in the punch bowl, and everybody said, "Oh, great, punch again." And they ran over and they filled their cups and they drank down. Shortly thereafter, they looked like they'd been hit over the head with a shovel. And everybody said, "I think I better go home now." And the party was over. Now, I know you can do things to make wine stronger, like fiddling with the fermentation process, or adding a special yeast, or even adding some sugar and brandy. What I'm wondering is, how much moonshine did Grandpa put in that wine?
Wow, it's a great story. So I wanted to it's funny, when Lynn was telling the story about alcohol, it made me think of a story when I was a teenager. I was the good one. I had a sister who was she was the experimenter, and I was sort of the very, stable, good, safe kid. And I remember we had a family guest come in to the house, and he stayed there when my parents were out of town. And I would just, I would have things in the house. And after he was there for visiting, he said to my mother, he said, the vodka, I had some of your vodka, and it tastes kind of like water. He said, "Is it possible that your son has been putting water in vodka?" And she's like, "No, not my son. He would never do that." She's, Gary, have you put any water in the vodka?" And I'm like, "Yep." All right. So, okay. So we have another new storyteller here tonight. We have Dave. Let's give it up for Dave. Okay. There's Dave. Give it up for Dave.
I'm having such a good time listening to the stories tonight that Gary said my name. I'm like, wait. Okay. So, all right. Okay, my name's Dave. This is the train story. So, this takes place when I'm 16 years old. My parents announced that we were going to take a trip down to Southern California. Pretty sure it was spring break. We were going to go down to San Clemente. My brother was already off in college, so it was just my parents and I. And to their credit, they did agree to bring my surfboard down with us. We drove down south because I had figured out that the hotel was just a couple of miles away from one of the best surf spots in California. It's named Trestles. I'd only seen pictures in magazines, I'd heard about it. So we were there for basically like the week of spring break, and we very quickly settled into this routine where I would get up in the morning early. My parents were on vacation, they're trying to sleep in. I would grab my surfboard, I would leave. I was 16, I could drive the car a couple miles down the road to this surf spot. And so you park in the lot, and there's like a bike path that goes down the hill, down to the beach level. When you get down to the beach, in order to get to the surf spot, you face a little choice. Your choices are, you can either trudge through like 3/4 of a mile of loose sand, or you can just walk along this old train bridge, known as a trestle, which is just like, it's about 150 yards long, and a trestle is just a very simple, it's just a rudimentary bridge. It's a really old school bridge. It's like if you took a bunch of sawhorses and put them together and just laid something on the top, like, that's a trestle. So keep in mind also, so because you're doing all this walking, you're in your street clothes, and you carry, like I have my towel over my shoulder, I have my wetsuit and a bag over my back, carrying the surfboard, so you're dragging all this stuff. And the first time down there, I don't know what I'm doing, so I decided to do the right thing, and I'll just trudge through the sand. So I did that, and I'm like halfway out there, and I see people walking back and forth across the train trestle, and I'm just feeling like an idiot, and even worse than that, as a surfer, I'm feeling like a kook. Kook is like the worst insult. Like, everyone else knows what to do, and I don't, and I'm already an idiot. So, but I wanted, so that's what I did the first time, and I walked out there, and I changed, and went out. It was so good, by the way. The surf lived up to expectations. So on day one, then I changed back out, and I'm ready to walk back up, and I just kind of like waited around a little bit, waited for a couple other guys to like start walking back, and then I just like followed them across the trestle, and everything worked out fine. So, and I should point out, like, in case anyone has any, from the movie Stand By Me images of a train over a beautiful river with forests on both sides, no. This is SoCal. It's like 20 feet high over a dry riverbed that's full of like boulders and rusty shopping carts, right? Like, it's just high enough that you're gonna get, at best, really hurt if you did not stay on the trestle. So that's the scene. So I come back, and then each day this repeats. Like, I go back to the hotel, we do family fun things, whatever. Next morning, I get up, I go down and surf trestles. And so I just kept going back and forth on the trestle. I got used to it. Now I'm an expert. I know my way around here. I know everything. And this worked out great for many days. And each day that I was out, when I was in the water, I would pay attention. When I heard a train coming, I would look and see, I was trying to get a pattern, right? I was getting up at the same time every morning. I'm going out at the same time every day. Trains should run on a schedule. So I'm like, I'll figure it out, right? That'd be nice to know. And like, I keep watching, and I cannot figure out any pattern. Like, sometimes it's an Amtrak train going to the south. Sometimes it's a freight train coming to the north, and then followed by a freight train to the south, and then an Amtrak train from the, I could not figure out a pattern. I tried, couldn't figure it out. So, the days go by, and of course, as so many stories do, we get to the last day. Dun, dun, dun. So, I went out, surfed, so this is so I went out, it was typically good. I'm coming back, I'm walking on the trestle like all these other days. And of course, I'm so anxious. I am just spinning in my head. I don't know why. But I just distinctly, the whole way, I'm looking back over my shoulder, and I should point out that when you look to the south, you can see for like a mile down the tracks. And then the tracks come by, they go over the trestle, and then they pretty much immediately turn right and go behind this sandstone cliff. So I'm so nervous, and like I decide like halfway through, I like bend down and I put my hand on the rails. So I'm like, well, the Native Americans said that they can feel the vibrations of the train from miles away. So I do that, and I'm like, well, dude, you didn't do that on any of the other days. So like, what's normal? Like, what is this normal? I don't know. I feel like it's vibrating. So then I'm just berating myself as I walk back, and just beating myself the whole time. And by now I'm almost like 3/4 of the way across, and it's like, this dude, you gotta take it easy on yourself. Bam! Amtrak train comes bursting out from behind those cliffs. And because I was so close to the end that I could see, I am running towards that end, which means I am running towards this train. And it is much, much closer. This is like the best answer. And so I'm now in a pretty serious situation. And it's just like, it's one of those things where like when the adrenaline's that strong, like you just you just really are in the zone, you're picking up every little detail. So as the train comes around and actually like kind of squares up with me, the first thing I noticed was the light on the train, and I was like, man, that was really bright. Like, I mean, it's broad daylight in Southern California. I'm just like, I'm running, right? I'm running, I got the gear, I got the towel, the wetsuit, the surfboard, I am just running. And I'm looking at this thing, and that's the first thing I noticed was like, the light is really bright. And then I noticed, also, the light is really high up. It's much taller than me, and much taller than I would think. And I'm just realizing, like, a locomotive is just really enormous. And it's much bigger than when you even board on the platform, right? When you are down on the tracks, and there is a locomotive bearing down on you, it's big. It's much bigger than you might think. And it started with the light, and then of course behind the light are like the diesel stacks, and you could see like the black smoke like billowing straight up out the back of the thing. And then in addition, down on the bottom, there was just all these like heat ripples coming out both sides. Like the whole landscape is just modeled by all the heat waves everywhere. So really, like, this is a portrait of a whole lot of energy. It's this huge mass moving very quickly. And so I'm running, I'm soaking all this in, I'm looking at it, and most importantly, as I'm running, I am doing the mental math of like, how long is it going to take me to get there, and how long is it going to take the train to get here? So, and I'm looking at this, and literally with every step I take, the math is not working out. I mean, the train is just covering so much ground. Like, it is just seriously, it's just going so fast. And I'm looking at it, and that's it. Like, I'm running. I don't have anything else to do right now. There's nothing else I can possibly do. And I'm running, and I'm looking at the situation. It's just like, okay. I'm trying to do the like, maybe I can, and then there was the horn. So, a train horn is a sound. That's true. This is a sound event. This is not a sound that like comes in your ears. This is a sound that like, I mean, it resonated in my lungs for one thing, but like, I mean, I'd love to have like the functional MRI of somebody with a train coming down, the train horn blaring in their head. Like, it was like this, it was like every molecule in my body was vibrating at the frequency of this train horn. And you can't think. I mean, like I said, I couldn't breathe. I can't think. I'm continuing to run. But it was just horrendous. I mean, it is like sound really can be a weapon, apparently. So then there's a break from the horn. And I was actually thinking for a second about how, like, yeah, there's a conductor in the train who's like sitting there, and that person does not like this situation either. And they didn't wake up in the morning to run some 16-year-old kid over. So there's a break from it, and then the horn comes back, and I'm continuing to run, and it's just like, it is seriously like, I mean, I was running, but otherwise it was like a paralyzing event. Like, you couldn't think, you couldn't breathe. It was just extremely intense. And I remember when the conductor let go of it again, I remember like, it's really not helpful. Like, I understand the situation here. There's a really big problem. There's a train coming at me. Like, I get it. I am working really hard to solve this problem. The horn is really, really not helping me. And the horn did end at that point, But the problem is, like, the math has not changed. Like, I am running out of time. So, in the end, I just ran until there was no more time left. Then I just jumped. And it was so close that, like, I mean, I stepped off the rail, and there was like a little funky catwalk and railing over here that I had to clear. So, I mean, I jumped. And the first thing that happened, it was so close to the train that the wind off the front of the train, like, you know, the train's just a giant Lego block doing 60 miles an hour, just blasting a big hole in the air. And the air picked up the surfboard and started to rip it out of my hands, but I held on because I'm like, this is like a sail taking me away from the train. I'm like, this is okay. That lasted a split second before, of course, because nature abhors a vacuum, the air around the train, like, it just, I mean, it's a vacuum. It is sucking back in behind the train. So within a split second, the surfboard comes smashing back into my ribs. And I am now being vacuumed back towards the train in the air. There's not much I can do about this. Thankfully, gravity is also playing a role, because I am now falling. And gravity won. I fell. I hit the ground. I had gone far enough that I was no longer at, you know, basically on, kind of on the edge, right? So I hit like this sandstone pile of dust and dirt. I don't remember. I hit the ground, which is, of course, a better situation than I was. But keep in mind, I'm now like in a heap on the ground, and there's an Amtrak train doing 60 miles an hour, like right there. This is still an extremely violent situation, right? The earth is shaking. The noise is insane. I remember looking up, and I remember seeing the windows of the train going by like this, and somehow I remember thinking, like, wow, there's people in there having like coffee and a croissant. And I'm like, wow, I'm so glad we took the train. This is beautiful. This is great. I just wanted to cry in like 100 different ways. So, and then in like, 15 seconds, the train's gone, right? And now it's quiet. And I picked myself up. I am okay. I gather up my stuff. I start to walk away. There is no one around. There's no one around. I'm like, did this even happen? Right? It was just a weird state of shock moment. So I walked back up the trail. I got in the car. I went to the hotel. Like I said, it was the last day. We need to pack up. We need to check out on time. We got to drive back. And I did all the things. And I sat in the back seat of the car on the way back with my Sony Walkman cassette player and my headphones on, and I didn't say a word the entire day. It's like my poor parents. It's just another day with moody teenagers, right? It's like, what's wrong with the kid? I don't know. I did eventually tell them later, and honestly, they didn't really get the severity of it somehow. Somehow, I think they were just not supposed to know. But to kind of tie in to the where has this taken since? I did, the big thing for me immediately was, as a 16-year-old boy, immortality was assumed. That was automatic. I'm gonna be fine. What's gonna happen? And so after the train incident, after I basically had to truly stare my mortality in the face, it definitely did shift things for me. And I remember at the time my takeaway was something like, if you want to do something in this life, you had best just get to it sooner than later. It's kind of my takeaway. And then when I look at how that played out for me, 2 years after college, I walked away from a perfectly acceptable career in biotech to do what I always wanted to do, which is to drive race cars for a living. And that led to a few years of hustling, and then I wound up driving race cars for a living.
Nice.
And I still work in professional motorsports now, doing some engineering consulting, and it's been a pretty good run. But the thing is, I think the only reason I was able to walk away from the cushy career path was actually because of the train story. And knowing if you want to do something, you better go do it.
Yeah, give it up for Dave. I was thinking when Dave was talking about the train horn, I get that same feeling when I'm on the phone and my wife's talking to me and my kid asks me where the spatula is and like I just can't, it's all shut down. Okay. So, our next storyteller is a veteran here at The Fly, and that is Marianne.
I'm going to try something different. I'm going to take the mic off the stand.
Do it.
I think my story has a little bit of the same theme of better try something before it's too late idea, and some love in it as well. My name's Marianne, and my story is about the moth. And that is where The Fly got its start from, or the idea from it. There are many things that are similar to it that you will hear about, but there's some things that are different. So I found myself on a very, very hot Saturday night Tuesday night in September, standing on the street outside the San Francisco Public Works building. All the rush tickets for the moth had been sold out, all the free tickets were gone, and there was only a few of us standing outside needing to get in. Now, I really needed to get in this particular night because my client had called me up about 2 hours earlier and said, tonight's the night I'm going to be telling my story. And I want you there. I'm like, oh boy. Now, I'm a drama therapist, not trauma, but drama. It's a type of psychotherapy. And part of what I do sometimes is to get people to work on pieces of material or parts of self. And I had this one client whose permission was given to me to tell this story. She wanted to one day stand on the stage at the Moth and tell a story. I thought, what a great idea, we can work on that. I had no idea that she had decided it had to be that night. They happen once a month. And I scrambled, drove in from Marin into San Francisco. There was horrible traffic. I guess there was some kind of accident. I circled around trying to find parking, and again, I'm just like, praying to the parking gods, and they come in for me every so often. Then I get there and there's no tickets left. I'm standing there sweating. It's super hot. It's not like how San Francisco normally is. A gal in front of me, her name's Melissa, and she has won the Grand Slam before, and she's like, I'm getting in. I'm like, me too. And lo and behold, some guy comes out and goes, I got an extra ticket. Anyone need it? So she gets in. So now it's just me. I get in. They let me in. This is before COVID, so they packed the place. It's okay. I get in there, the music's thumping, the lights are blinking. I think it's grilled cheese night, so like they're grilling. There's always some kind of vendor, and it smelled really good. And I'm looking for my client, but as a therapist, you're not supposed to out anybody. They have to come to you first, And I know BB really wants me there, but I'm still scanning, and it was way more crowded than this space. It was like people up in the loft. I had no idea where she is. But at some point I hear, Marianne, and I see an arm waving, and she's in the way back of the room in the dark. And she's in her mid-80s, and she's brought her husband, who's in his 90s. He's got his walker. And I go back there, and they seem to be thrilled to be here. They're just thrilled. And I say, great, did you sign up to tell your story? And she's like, what? And I said, and I literally run to the front. The lights are going down, they're making the announcement. The host is named Corey Rosen, and then there's a woman named Nashima who's a volunteer. And they're like, last call, we're about to start. And I get up to the front, and I was like, wait. There's a wonderful lady who really wants to tell a story tonight, but she's in her 80s and she's in the way back. And can I grab one of these forms and get... She goes, bring her up here, honey. We got 2 seats in the front row for handicapped. I'm like, yes. So the theater gods are working in my favor. I bring them up to the front and fill out the paperwork. And Baby looks at me and she goes, you gotta do it too. I said, no, this is your night. And she goes, no, do it. I want you to do it too. So at least we have 2 chances. One of us will get up there to tell the story. So if I can't tell the story, then at least you can tell the story and I can watch you. And then we can talk about it in session. So we fold up our pieces of paper, and they have this big bag that you just throw it in, and there's bunches of papers in there. And the thing starts, the lights come down, the whole event starts, and they have this big board on the wall with 10 spaces. So there are only 10 speakers, 5 in the beginning, intermission. Oh, it's kind of like here. And then they actually vote, the audience votes on like who's the winner. So we don't do that here, which is nice, there's no pressure. And then I sit down in the back, I get one of their seats. And I sit next to this lady who's got 2 cocktails, one in each hand. And she's like, my brother lives on the East Coast and he just won the Grand Slam. And I've got a story. We're a family of storytellers. I'm like, oh, how nice. Yeah, okay. So it starts. And one story after another, each time the storyteller's finished, they're invited to put their hand in the bag and pull out the next person. We get up to story number 7, and BB has not been picked yet. And at this point, I'm like, oh no, we only have 3 more chances. Please, 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 if it's meant to be her night tonight, please let it happen. Please, please, please. And I'm just praying and begging my angels and guides and them, please, please, please. And they put the hand in, they pull out the name, and the woman next to me screams. She goes, that's me! And she steps over me, and she staggers up to the stage. And she tells her story, but at the 5-minute mark comes and she gets dinged. And then she gets dinged again until they finally pull her off. And it's a really good story, but you know, the liquid courage was a bit too much, and she's slurring her words, and she's taking long pauses and repeating herself. And she's finished, and she's about to leave, like, no, you gotta pick the next person. So I got 2 more chances. She puts her hand in, she pulls it out, she hands it to Corey. Corey reads it. Marianne Shine. It's me! Oh my gosh. Okay, so I run up to the front and I go by BB. I'm like, this is your chance. Take my spot. You do it. She's like, no, honey. You go. I'll watch. I was like, okay. Shit, I didn't prepare a really good story. That's number 1. You really should prepare a story before you go to the mock. So I get up there and I have a sort of bumpy, unrehearsed story about neighborhoods. I think that was the topic. And she's sitting in the front row with her husband, and they're looking up at me just like you guys. It feels so good. And they're just so happy to have somebody they know to tell a story. And it went really well. It was wonderful. Now it's my turn to pick the last person of the night. I put my hand in the bag, and I feel so many pieces of paper. Each one is connected to somebody who really wants to tell a story, but there's only 1 spot left. Again, I pray up to the theater guys. I'm like, please, 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 BB's turn. If it's meant to be, just make it be tonight, because I don't think they'll ever be back here again. Put it in. I hand it over to Corey. He opens up the envelope, unfolds it, reads the name into the thing, into the microphone, and says, BB. And I'm like, wow. Oh my God. Just telling it right now, I'm getting chills again. I just can't believe my luck. And I watch her stand up, and I have to get back to my seat. And she works her way around to the back, to the stairs very gently, and the audience is wondering, who is it? Who is it? And when she finally makes her way onto the stage, she's so adorable. She has this little halo of white fluffy hair and a little purple blouse, and she comes up to the microphone, and it's like this. And the host, Corey, has to come by and lower it for her. And she's so nervous, she backs far away from it like this, and he encourages her to come up close like this. And she takes a deep breath and closes her eyes, and she starts on the story. And then when she opens her eyes, she looks at her husband, and he's just in awe of her, just so in love. And she tells a story about how they met 50 years before. Pretty much anybody in that room was not even born yet. And it's such a sweet story, and the whole room has this collective, oh, by the time she ends. She didn't win that night, but in my mind and in her heart, she did win. And to watch her husband just cheer her on, and a few days later he had heart surgery, and a couple of months later he passed away. And it was absolutely one of the most magical, amazing moments that she had, and it came true, and I'm just so happy to share it.
Marianne. So I run this thing called The Fly. You might be familiar with it. We're here tonight. I've listened to the Moth podcast. I've listened to all the Story Hour. I have never been to the Moth, so I should go. Okay, let's have. We're gonna have Rebecca come on up here. Let's give it up for Rebecca.
Full disclosure, I've also been writing a monologue in French this week for my French oral final exam. I'm writing a humorous piece about how difficult it is to visit my parents' house with all their rolls. Tu n'es pas utilise la toilette dans les premiers étages, c'est mauvais. Mais j'étais en nouvel système septique à très dernière année. Elle était en 5,000. So I want to use the downstairs toilet. Anyway, my story is called Burn It Down to the Ground. And it is the story of the demise of a relationship. If you listen closely to the words of your lover at the very beginning, they will reveal to you exactly how he will leave you in the end. If his stories are full of rust and rot, of like blackened bricks and shattered glass, then someday that man is going to burn you down to the ground. If he constantly talks to you that he has to run from calm into absolute chaos, then someday that man is going to flee from your careful, tidy home. If he has left a shattered woman in his wake, then someday it's going to be you picking up all the pieces. Now, I should have been paying attention because I knew this was a man whose fingers absolutely itched for matches. But I believed I was different. In the very beginning, he said to me, "I'm afraid I'm gonna fuck this all up." You really need to listen to the words of your lover at the very beginning, because they will absolutely reveal how they're going to leave you in the end. Now, I am soft, and I am kind, and I am a lovely woman. But that can only soothe a man who has a tendency to set it all aflame from time to time for a very short spell. My coffee in the morning is absolutely stellar, and I've got a great ass. But that can only stave off a deep desire for destruction for so long. Now I can see the signs. I can see how my man has suddenly become like a walking red flag warning. Like he's walking around like he's got this high pressure dome of low humidity over him, like the winds are rising, like his feet are absolutely covered in dried up crispy foliage. All it would take is like the tiniest little spark to set this all ablaze. And here I am searching the skies. I am looking for signs. I am looking for these almost like imaginary little microscopic shifts in his attentions, like shifts that nobody else would see. But for me, they are like shots into my heart. So, I do the only obvious thing. I say, "What's wrong?" he just offers me evasive platitudes of promises and says, nothing's wrong. I saw the signs. I smelled the smoke. And still, when it all came ablaze, I was caught so off guard. I was so blindsided. I was so burned. And I was so heartbroken. Because you need to listen carefully to the words of your lover that he says to you in the very beginning, because they will tell you exactly how he's going to leave you in the end. And in the end, I was not the exception. I was the rule. Thank you.
Such a good story. Thank you, Rebecca. Okay, we have one more. You guys have all hung in there with me. It's late. We're all getting tired, but we have a great story coming up. Is Alice going to come up and tell her story? Let's give it a big hand for Alice. Yeah, here we go.
Okay, yeah, it has been a little bit of a longer night, so luckily this story doesn't need to be very long, and I still think it will be a good time to listen to. So, pets, they are kind of like a necessary, learning lesson that I think we all have as children, because they teach you responsibility, time management, and how to have compassion for other creatures. And so a lot of us have them in our childhood, but a lot of people when they first get into college also decide, hey, this is a great time to learn those lessons now that I'm a young adult. Yeah, I had a hamster when I was 8, but I'm really gonna do this on my own. And I took an anthropology class, and I actually wrote a paper about how college students take care of their pets. And in my observations, I found that students, they want their responsibility, but they also know their limitations. So people typically co-parent these pets and kind of split up their responsibilities so that it's not all falling on them. Which was actually really interesting. And so it wasn't uncommon in my college town for houses to have a house pet that everyone kind of owned and loved and cared for. And my house had a house pet. And instead of being normal, having a dog or a cat, or maybe even a hamster or a mouse, we had a tortoise. And this tortoise was kind of bestowed onto us. I had a roommate whose aunt lived in Humboldt, and she had this tortoise and was just I don't really want to take care of him. He's a pretty low-key guy. You guys can totally have him for the year. And we were stoked because we're this is great. His name was Humphrey, super chill guy. And the best part about Humphrey was that he hibernated for most of the year. So we actually didn't really see him that much for the first couple months that we had him. And we kind of just tied a balloon around him so we knew where he was around the house. He would pick different sleeping spots, and we kind of never really knew where he was, and sometimes the balloon would deflate, and we would be oh, we gotta go look for Humphrey now, but we kind of had an idea of where he liked to hang out in the house. So this was, we're learning responsibility, we're working together, we're taking care of Humphrey, and then hibernation season kind of ends. And this is when we really start to kind of meet his personality. And Humphrey was a sneaky guy. I know tortoises are supposed to be these slow, kind of mundane creatures, but this guy was sneaky and honestly pretty fast for a tortoise. You never really knew where he was gonna show up in the house. And when he got moving, he was going. you know? So we had this rule in the house where whoever was last to leave, you had to close the side gate because Humphrey would find ways to get out of the house, and we didn't want him getting outside of the fence of our side yard because I think we were all kind of new, like at that point it was game over. Like if he got out past the house, like there's no knowing where he could end up. Because, you know, he's kind of an adventurous guy, we were learning. After all these, like, random places, we had found him in the house. And so, one day I'm kind of like, you know, I'm at campus, probably studying for a midterm or something, and I get a text from my roommate that says, emergency, like, you need to come home now. And I read this text, and I'm like, oh my God, did we get robbed again? Which is a funny reference to the last story I told if you were here, because I threw a party and we got robbed. And I'm like, okay, if we did get robbed, at least it wasn't my fault this time because I wasn't even at the house. But my head just starts flooding with all of these different things that could be happening. So I race over to the house. All of my housemates are in the living room and they just look distraught. And I'm like, okay, this is definitely way worse than us getting robbed. Like, I have no idea what's happening right now. And they look at me and they're like, the side gate was open when we got home and we can't find Humphrey. And we looked in all of the places where, you know, he usually hangs out in the house. I mean, we tore the house apart looking for him and he was nowhere to be found. So really the only explanation is that he got out of the side gate and like, we have no idea where he is. So my roommates go to the campus library and we start printing flyers, you know. Lost tortoise, no questions asked. Call this number, we miss him. Also his name is Humphrey. You can try calling him by name, I don't know if he'll come. But, you know, just please let us, like, help us find this tortoise. And, you know, flyers, little old-fashioned, weren't really getting a lot of responses from people. Actually, nobody called us. So we're starting to feel a little defeated. And so at this time of, like, I think it must have been, like, I want to say 2016, but this was kind of like an experimental era of like different apps kind of popping up. And there was this one app that was really popular in college towns called Yik Yak. And Yik Yak was essentially like a live, like kind of almost like a chat where people could post anonymous messages. So you'd get a lot of stuff like, if you're the cute brunette in Math 103 at 8 a.m., like, I'm letting you know you're cute. Or like, just like random things like that college kids like want to say to each other, but like they do it under this veil of like, you know, being anonymous. And I started going on that app and seeing if anyone was talking about tortoises, because that's something that a college kid would definitely post about on an anonymous forum. It's like, hey, I saw this tortoise. And so I start going on there, I'm like telling my roommates, I'm like, you guys should just go on there periodically and see if anyone's talking about it. And then one day, there's a post on Yik Yak that's like, hey, crazy story, but if you're missing a tortoise, he's at the college like co-op. Somebody found him on the side of the road and they took him to work. I'm like, no way, I called it. Like, I knew that we were going to find him this way, but also I'm very relieved that we now have a lead to where Humphrey is. So we go to the co-op, and it's like the only organic grocery store in like all of like this college town. So it's like, yeah, Humphrey would have totally ended up there. Out of all places, he's like such a little bougie, adventurous tortoise. He's probably getting like organic tofu in the back or something, and like fresh lettuce and kale. Like I know they're treating him well there. And so we show up and they're like, oh yeah, like, you know, we're actually just like keeping him in the back of like our manager's truck. Like he's ready to go. Like you guys can totally take him. And so we grab Humphrey, and it's like our family is reunited again. You know, like the relief and just the joy of having our tortoise back in our home was great, you know. And it was really cool that we got to like kind of utilize this modern technology to find our tortoise. And so on that note of using modern technology, we were like, how do we prevent this from happening again? And we ended up buying, they're called tiles, which is in today's world an air tag essentially. And we just stuck that right on his shell, so we would never lose track of him ever again. So not only were we like the only house in this college town to have a pet tortoise, but we were also the only one to have a tortoise that needed a tile or GPS tracking system to keep us from losing him. And you know, Humphrey has since passed away. You know, I know it's very sad. And he got himself in some trouble because you know he was very adventurous. But you know, he was a great guy, chill guy, and you know, he'll always live fondly in our hearts. But that's the story of Humphrey.
Oh my gosh, give it up for Alex. Okay, everybody, we have reached the end of the 1-year anniversary. Now, big hand for all the storytellers tonight. Okay, I want to do one thing though before you leave. First of all, I want to remind you that we have a show coming up on June 20th, which we'll do this again. But also, and the theme is bending the rules. But also, I would love it if we could get all the storytellers up here right now and all come up here and we'll take a big picture and we'll thank everybody for coming and then you guys can all go home. Thank you, everybody. Watch your step, please. And I'm going to have my wife take a picture. All right. Everybody up here, all the storytellers. I'm going to wear my fly hat. All right. Wow, here we go.
You okay? You all right?
Yeah. Excellent. Fred, quick! Wait, Fred! Fred!